Hello and welcome into the RotoWire PGA Rundown Show. I am your host, Ryan Andrade. Joining me, as always, is my fellow golf writer at RotoWire, Mr. Lynn Hochberg. Today, we'll be previewing all things fantasy golf for this week's Truist Championship. We'll talk some DFS, we'll talk some best bets, some one and done, and more. But first, Lynn, as we always do, we got to talk about what we saw last week at the Cadillac Championship. New event, but familiar course, Doral. Cameron Young was the guy that got it done, just absolutely dominated. Ended up winning by 6 shots over Scotty Scheffler, led the field in strokes gained putting. This is now his 3rd win in his last 14 starts after he started his career 0 for 93. So finally learning how to close things out. Just talk about the performance that we saw from Cam Young and, his just ascension in the world of golf at this point.
One of the things that really struck me, he was great. He was great. He played 3 of the 4 days with Scotty Scheffler, which can't be easy. And he really took it to Scheffler on the first day. He shot a 64. I think he had a 7-shot lead on Scheffler right there, and he won by 6. He just never let him back in. When Scheffler is there, he always makes the run on the weekend, and you get nervous because he's Scotty Scheffler, but there was none of that. So it was very, very impressive. And when you drive the ball the way that Cam Young drives the ball, I guess there's not a lot of reason to be nervous. So he's clearly the number 3 golfer in the world. It looks like we have sort of a big 4 at the top right now. But he was just outstanding.
Yeah, that was actually one thing I wanted to ask you about. It kind of, sometimes throughout the years we kind of get ahead of ourselves with this big 3, big 4 in golf, whatever it is. But it really does feel like 4 golfers have really separated themselves from everybody else right now. Scotty, obviously world number 1. Rory's coming off his 2nd straight Masters win. Cameron Young obviously has 2 big wins in the last couple months. Fitzpatrick has won 3 of his last 4 starts. Do you expect this sort of trend to continue with these 4 guys just taking some of these biggest tournaments, or do you think there's anybody else that can challenge them?
I think there's probably more than one guy who could challenge them, but Xander Schauffele has been sneaky good this year without winning, of course, but he's really playing very well. He's playing a lot better than he was last year, and he's probably motivated by the fact that we and probably others are talking about a big 4 and he's not in it. And I guess I'm not ready to dismiss Bryson DeChambeau out of pocket just yet in the biggest tournaments. But these guys look awesome, and I expect them to continue playing well. The only thing is Rory, if he just doesn't play a lot. But Scheffler finishes 2nd every week, and to Young or to Fitzpatrick. So yeah.
Yeah, Scotty, you said it. He's finished runner-up now 3 straight tournaments. Feels like he's really kind of put those questions to bed that we had during kind of that rough stretch for him, late February, March. Last year Scheffler had a very similar sort of record going into May, and then he ended up winning 6 times once the calendar turned to May, including 2 majors. Do you think, Scotty's prime for another big run like that here?
I think it's just a matter of time. I'm trying to retweet us to get this out, our little shindig that we do here. Sorry. To dismiss him, I'm working on my PGA Championship power rankings. He's number 1. Going to sound silly. There's some way, in some metrics, you could say he's been the best golfer this year. Of course, we always define it by who's winning and winning majors and winning tournaments, but he's there every week. He's the only one who's there every week. He's leading the tour he's leading FedEx Cup standings. He's 1st in birdie average. He's 1st in bogey avoidance. I don't think it's, any week he plays, he can win. I think it's just foolish to think otherwise. Yes, his approach play is not quite where it was, which is why he has not winning 8 tournaments this year. But he's really, 99.9% of the golfers would kill to have what Scotty Scheffler has. So it would not surprise me one iota, or I don't think anybody, if he won next week at the PGA.
Yeah, that's a great point. As we kind of talk about going into the Truist and some of the top storylines here, I think a big thing everybody's sort of been talking about, I know we've talked about it a few weeks ago on the show, but this loaded schedule, this kind of period in between the Masters and the PGA, you got 3 signature events in a 4-week span, split in between 2 major championships. I mean, it's forced guys to make a lot of decisions about, where they want to play. It's tough to play every single one of them if you're one of the top guys. Rory and Fitzpatrick did not play the signature event last week. Rory also did not play the RBC Heritage. Scotty is taking this week off as he did last year. There were some questions on that. Obviously, he won the PGA Championship last year at Quail Hollow. The Truist is now at Quail Hollow again this year. Would he return to the side of his win? Decides to skip it again. And I feel like that's not really a good thing, Len, right? They put the signature event model in place here to try to get all these top players to play together as many times as they could. And, the fact that we've now had 3 straight signature events and, with a field that doesn't include both Rory McIlroy and Scotty Scheffler. I mean, just your thoughts on kind of this part of the schedule. And, do you expect the PGA Tour to make some changes going forward into 27?
They want to add more big events next year. I count sort of 16 big events this year with the 8 signatures, 4 majors, players, 3 playoff events. I think that's 16. Brian Roloff had talked about 21 to 26 big events. You're just going to have more and more players skipping these tournaments, especially if they're all 20 million. When they're all 3.6 million or more. I mean, as bizarre as it is, at some point, that's not going to be enough of an impetus if they're all that much money. There was a great headline on golfchannel.com. I wish I had come up with it. They called it load management, like in the NBA. And that is disaster public relations for the NBA. That is the bigger than the tanking problem, I think, in the NBA, is the stars sitting out games, and you pay a lot of money to go see them, and they're not there. And load management is really a bad thing to be associated with your sport. And I think that's what we have here. Rory sat out 2 signature events in a row. I don't think that's ever happened before. And and Fitzpatrick and Hochberg and Cantlay and Morikawa. We don't know if Morikawa might be injured, but it doesn't appear anyone else has been injured. So I think this is a problem. And then it sort of lets some other guys in who aren't that good into these great events. And, the 6,000s or even in these small fields are kind of dicey. So I think this is a real issue here, and it'd be very interesting to see how Brian Roloff negotiates this with his desire to have more big events. We shall see.
Yeah, to me, it's kind of interesting because Roloff has preached a lot about scarcity and, making each event feel bigger. And, to me, we came into this season, there was 9 scheduled signature events. Obviously, we didn't have the Century, but 8, I mean, just to pack it in between like all these majors and everything, it honestly, it feels like it kind of waters some of them down. I think if maybe they went to 5 and found a way to put, one a couple of weeks before the Players, one a couple of weeks before the Masters, the PGA, US Open, the Open, and kind of had a nice cadence with the schedule there, I feel like it would sort of elevate each of those signature events instead of just making it feel like, not a really a big thing. I mean, this past week at Doral, there wasn't really much juice on the ground. It didn't seem like. I don't know if that's because, F1 was also in Miami that weekend. That's a lot more glamorous of a ticket, I would guess, than, going and standing out at Doral. But, hey, Cadillac put up the money, and the PGA Tour wasn't going to turn them down for it. So, nonetheless, we'll see. I've seen, they've added a few events to the schedule next year. Not a whole lot of surprises other than the fact that, they're not going to start the season in Hawaii as we expected, but we'll just kind of see how that shakes out. But, nonetheless, Len, we are here. There's a really great field. Somebody's going to win this week. So, speaking of wins at Quail Hollow, Rory McIlroy has 4 of them. This is going to be his first start since the Masters. I mean, 3 weeks off. What kind of do you expect from Rory this week?
Yeah, I look for him to play well. This is his wheelhouse course, although Augusta National now also appears to be his wheelhouse course. But yeah, I mean, when a guy wins at this place 4 times, and for good reason, it's just perfectly suited for his game. I don't want to overanalyze it. He's certainly fresher than all the other guys playing all the signature events. So there's a lot to like about Rory McIlroy, and he probably just has this great feeling every time he comes back to Quail Hollow. He didn't win the PGA last year there, but he finished 7th. So he even had, he was good in that tournament, and it was a lot harder than it will be this week. It'll still be hard, but not major hard.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because, a lot was made of Rory's preparation for the Masters, took 3 weeks off before the Masters, and, was flying in the afternoon to play Augusta. And, that was a whole big storyline. I haven't heard anything about him, going up to Aronimink. Maybe he doesn't feel like he needs to. Not sure, but it's definitely a completely different preparation process for him going in to the PGA Championship, trying to kind of find his game the week before and then go there. But, nonetheless, Rory, Quail Hollow suits his game for sure. Just talking about Quail Hollow as a whole, Len, what kind of are the biggest keys for you when examining the field this week?
Yeah, it's just super long, driving distance really matters this week. And last week was a long course. Last week was a longer course, but the fairways were wider than they are this week. So it's not a major setup, but it's probably the closest thing to a major setup that we will see all year. It's long. It's fairly narrow. You will have to hit the ball. You will have an advantage if you hit the ball far, but you do want to get it in the fairway as well. There was just some really long, hard holes, famously the Green Mile, the 2 really long par 4s to finish at 16 and 18, sandwiched by the par 3. They play super hard. They played super hard in the PGA. They played super hard every year. It's really interesting. I'm really like the way this course is laid out, because 14 is a drivable par 4. 15 is a gettable par 5. So I think with those last 5 holes, we could see a lot of swings here. Bogey avoidance is key this week, but I think in my research, I've seen that putting really does matter this week, even though the winning score could be 12, 11, 13, 10, somewhere maybe even single digits, that you will have to make some putts, maybe for par, or maybe for bogey instead of double bogey. It's not going to be for birdie, but you do have to have a bit of a putter, I think, to win this week.
Yeah, I think what I said in my FanDuel preview was this is one of the courses that really tests every bag in your game. I feel like whether it's driving it long and straight, you got to be able to do that. You're going to get a lot of long irons. Those are hard to hit, and sometimes it's a great place for people to separate. The chipping it can be pretty difficult around here off Bermuda grass, and then the greens are usually very fast here as well. So you kind of got to have everything this week. It's really a complete test. So let's get into the DraftKings DFS board here as I pull that up quickly. Interesting, Lynn, we kind of talked about, there might be a big 4 developing, but, when you look at the board here, you wouldn't really suspect that, you got Rory McIlroy all the way up at 11,700. Not quite a Scheffler number here, but certainly a lot larger than Cameron Young down at 10,100. You got Xander at 10,000, and you got Fitzpatrick at 9,900 here. So, any surprise there that those guys like Young and Fitzpatrick are so far below Rory this week?
I was surprised, especially with Young separated so much, like $1,600. So that definitely caught my eye. I guess I'm not really surprised that Xander, we talked earlier in our show here, how I think really Xander is a little bit under the radar, and it's hard to be above the radar when you're not winning, but he's been playing sneaky good. And it's not a complete surprise, a little bit of a surprise to me that he is ahead of Fitzpatrick, but I would have put them both right in the same neighborhood. So a little bit of a surprise there for me.
Yeah. But of the guys up there, the 9K range, who are you playing this week, Glenn?
In the 9K range, Siwoo Kim, I keep waiting for the clock to strike 12, but it just isn't. He's just playing really, really well. I mean, he's had a couple of bad weeks, and bad weeks at the Players and the Masters are not good weeks to have bad weeks. But he's just been fantastic otherwise, and without being able to putt. He still can't putt, but that speaks to how great the rest of his game is, to be able to be finishing in the top 10 week after week after week without putters. I see so many times that guys who are great ball strikers and stuff, they can elevate themselves into the top 25, but without a putter, they can't crack into the top 10. They can't make enough putts. They can't do enough, but he's still managing to do it. And Sam Burns at 9,100, I think, is a very nice price. Kind of a dark horse, maybe contender to win. It's hard to say this is his best year because he's had some years where he's won a couple of times, but in a lot of ways, this might be his best year ever. He was 13th last time this tournament was played at Quail Hollow. He's one of the best putters on tour. Talked about needing to make some putts. 13th at the Players, 7th at the Masters. He's doing a lot of good things and almost in the 8,000s. Like him a lot this week.
Yeah, Burns I think the iron play has been a really big thing for him. It's been a lot better this year for sure than it certainly was last year. And he's always a great putter on Bermuda greens like this. So Burns is definitely one I would watch out for as well. Going down into the 8K range here, my favorite play here was actually the guy right at the top of it, Adam Scott. Leading the PGA Tour in strokes gained approach. Just a great weekend at Doral, went 14 under, came all the way up into a T4 finish. He's still 16th in driving distance at age 45. We've been saying this a lot this year, whether it's Gary Woodland sitting way out there at 41, Justin Rose played super well this year at 45 too. So it's kind of cool to see some of these old guys still hanging in there when these courses are playing that long. You got he's had a really good record here in the past, 7 top 25 finishes. And he's actually gained strokes on the greens here in his last 4 starts at Quail Hollow. So, said he kind of struggled the first couple of days at Doral with his putting, said he got a tip from Trevor Immelman and seemed to help him a little bit down the stretch. So we'll see if he can carry that in this week. Anybody else in the 8K range, Len, that you really like?
I do like Scott. I just wanted to piggyback on that. And once he started playing his own ball, he was much better. And I played him. He was my pick for first round leader. And when you play the wrong ball and you get that sort of squashes that, but he made it all the way back to 4th place. That was amazing. I'm very big on one other thing, his club head speed, and Woodland, just incredible club head speed, which also is pretty remarkable for their age. I also like Minwoo Lee at 8,300. I'm still stinging from telling everybody who wanted to listen to me that Minwoo Lee would have a great Masters. and he didn't. And it's really hard, as we all know, I think, to go back to a guy who just burns you so badly because you don't want to, like, oh, I did it again. But there's a lot to like about Minwoo Lee, his game and the fit for this course. So back on Minwoo Lee at 8,300.
Yeah, Minwoo is a guy that definitely should fit this course. I mean, long hitter for sure, but I feel that Len, sometimes a guy burns you, and it's tough to ever get back there. And then it seems like the week that you finally get off of him, he performs just like he thought he would. So, we'll see what happens there. Going down to the 7K range. Kurt Kitayama is a guy that I'm really high on this week, whether it's DraftKings, whether it's FanDuel. I think his value is excellent. Ranks super high in some of the models I did this week because of his tremendous ball striking. He's top 20 in driving distance, strokes gain approach, greens and regulation percentage, and proximity. He's also 12th in bogey avoidance and 9th in par 4 scoring. I think those are going to be some good secondary stats this week. But the signature events have been very kind to him this year. He's got 3 top 10s in the signature events, including each of the last 2. So, definitely got a feel for these type of, limited field, no cut events. I expect a lot of good things from Kitayama this week. Anybody else land in the 7K range that strikes you?
Another guy who's played well at the past 2 signature events, Akshay Bhatia. And what I like about the fact that Kitayama did well at both signature events and Bhatia did both completely different courses, Harbour Town and Doral. So their game is really strong to be able to go from one place to the completely different place and play well at both. That's a key thing that made me jump on Bhatia this week, because he's sort of fallen off the radar a little bit since Bay Hill, and he missed the cut at the Masters. And if you just play bad at these big tournaments, it really is a stain. But he's been playing very well this year overall, and he's now down in the 7,000s at 7,700. So that's a very favorable price that could fit into every lineup. Jacob Bridgman, this may be a last call for me on Bridgman. We've all liked him a lot, but the last 3 tournaments he started out with 8 top 25s in his first 8 starts, including the win at Riviera. But the last 3 starts, no top 25s. But I think he's still a great approach player. He's still a terrific putter. Putting again, I think, will matter this week. I'm going to take one last flyer on Jacob Bridgman this week at 7,500.
All right. As we work down even further into the 6K range, this is a limited field, 72 players, but that really means that it gives you a lot of options. I think all the way down here in the 6K range, there's a lot of guys that could certainly pop this week. I'm going to take a name that just so you don't have to pronounce it, Len. Sudarshan Yelamarahu as my guy, 6,700 this week. Just continues to pop in a lot of the models I've been coming up with. He's 11th in total driving, 9th in proximity, and 11th in putts per green in regulation. This is a guy that he's a really long hitter, and he makes a lot of birdies. Those are always good for DFS purposes. And obviously doesn't have any experience here at this course, but I think it's going to be a great fit for him. And I expect a lot from him this week. I think he's a really good value at 6,700. Len, who else you got in the 6K range?
Yeah, the other guy I like is Michael Kim. He's had a very slow start to the season. He's starting to play better. We don't know if last year was a complete fluke yet. The jury is still out on that. But he finished top 25 again. Another guy, top 25 at Harbour Town and Doral, which means a lot of things are going well in the game. It just wasn't in his game. It just wasn't a course that happened to be a good for him. He didn't play at the PGA at Quail Hollow last year. He was a WD, but his approach numbers have been okay, kind of in the middle of the road, but a great putter.
Yeah, and then real quickly before we move on, Len, I just wanted to ask you about something. We've had a lot of these signature event fields, 72-man fields, no cut events. Is there, when you're doing DFS, is there a certain type of player that you're more likely to target in those type of events versus a full field event at we're going to the Byron Nelson in a couple of weeks? Is there anything different in the type of players that you'd look for?
Not so much. I mean, the course will really dictate that more than the size of the field. But what the size of the field does, especially if there's a no-cut event, in creating lineups and stuff, you might feel more. I would feel more comfortable taking a $6,000 guy with the confidence that he's not going to miss the cut, that he's at least going to give you 4 rounds, and if he does play well, he can move up the leaderboard very quickly. He doesn't have to pass a lot of guys. So the smaller fields will maybe make me take a little more risk with the lesser guys, but I still look to see who I think is going to play well on a certain course. I think there are a lot of these 6,000 guys are not going to play well this week.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Let's jump over to the betting board here. As I pull it up on DraftKings, we got Rory McIlroy leading the way at plus 570, Cameron Young at plus 930, Xander Schauffele at plus 1175. Lynn, I was surprised, Fitzpatrick is, the fourth choice here, but he's all the way down at 17-1 in this signature event. I mean, the guy's won 3 of his last 4 starts, and then he finished second the week before that to Cam Young. I'm not sure, what else he needs to do here to get a little bit more respect. Is that, you think that number is a little bit too high on Fitzpatrick?
Yeah, it is odd, although I guess I didn't give him a whole lot of respect either by not picking him in my DraftKings article, but I didn't pick Cameron Young either. So yeah, I hate to question. I never like to question these guys who set the odds, because they're the smartest guys in the room. So maybe it doesn't mean that they don't think the guy is going to play well, but of course they also have to sort of price the guy in keeping in mind what they think the betting public will do and what that number will generate in terms of bets. So I'm sure a lot of that goes into it as well.
Yeah, I think just one other thing that caught my eye as I was scrolling through here is you had Chris Goddard and Jordan Spieth at the same number this week, 43-1. I mean, Spieth hasn't won since 2022. Goddard's won 3 times in the last 10 months. Seems to be an ideal course fit as just a guy that can absolutely bomb it. Didn't play as well as I thought he would play last week, but nonetheless, that's kind of interesting that those 2 guys are right there. As we always do, Len, we do a favorite bet of the week. One bet could be an outright, can be a placement, could be a prop. Give me your favorite bet this week.
Yeah, hard to get really good numbers on a top 20 in such a small field, but Batia is plus 162, and he did finish top 25 the last 2 weeks. It's not quite a top 20, but I do like his chances this week. He has been playing well, really outside of the Masters. So 162 is a pretty large number for a top 20 in this field.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with the guy that you talked about a little bit earlier, Siwoo Kim. He is plus 395 for a top 5 finish. Honestly, he kind of reminds me at this point of Tommy Fleetwood, the guy that just racks up all these really high finishes and just can't win. But he's already got 4 top 5s this season, including each of these last 2 signature events. Got a pretty good record at Quail Hollow as of late, T16, T8 the last couple of years. The iron play has been just so impressive, 4th in strokes gained approach, 2nd in proximity from 150 to 175. He's 1st from 175 to 200, and he's 1st from 200 to 225. I think long irons gonna be very, very important this week. Especially for a guy like him that really doesn't hit it that far. He hits a ton of fairways. I think he's leading PGA Tour in driving accuracy, but so maybe the lack of distance hurts him a little bit this week. But when you're that good with those long irons, it's hard to really bet against him, especially the way he's played of late. So I'm gonna go with Siwoo Kim there. Let's dive into some one and done, I guess, here, Len. And we got last week there was another big brigade on Cameron Young. We had 6 guys in our RotoWire pool that took Cameron Young and won the $3.6 million that went along with it, including our RotoWire golf writer Bryce Danielson and our RotoWire golf editor Kevin O'Brien. Those guys now sit 1-2 in the RotoWire pool, so good for them. Len, we didn't do quite as good this past week. You had Goddard, I had Gary Woodland. They both finished T38. You, though, sit a lot higher than me in the standings off of that Matt Fitzpatrick win that you had at the RBC Heritage. I'm just looking for anything at this point, Len. I mean, what do we think of this week, strategy wise, and then, just we can dive right into picks.
Yeah, it's just a question, now we're getting to the point in the season. Who do we have left? Who do we want to save for a major or the playoffs? And, there's a lot more than just who do we think is going to play well this week. I mean, yes, we want to pick someone who's going to play this week, but it's not that simple. And it just gets harder as the season goes. And I have Sam Burns this week. Going to use Sam Burns at some point. Didn't think I would use Sam Burns in a signature event if you would have asked me at the beginning of the season, but we've talked about how he's playing better this season. He's always been a great putter. You mentioned how his iron play is so much better, and we see that in his results. I guess that's sort of one tournament he's contended in. He hasn't really contended, but anyway, Sam Burns is the guy.
I like that. I'm actually going to go back to the well. I'm going with Cameron Young. I think there's a ton of similarities between Doral and Quail Hollow. I think, Bombers have been very successful on both those courses. Both of them are blanketed in Bermuda grass. I think sometimes there's a little bit of a hesitancy for people, it seems like, for a guy coming directly off a win, especially a win the previous week. So we'll see. I think there's still quite a few people that have Cameron Young in our RotoWire league, but I'm just kind of hoping at this point some people decide to save him for one of the majors. I think it wouldn't surprise anybody at this point the way he's playing if he knocked down one of those majors. But I'm gonna go Cameron Young to go back to back. So I need something, Len. It's been quite the struggle for me so far this year, but sometimes that's just how it goes in one and done, right? You can have all the perfect strategies, and you pick a guy the wrong week, the next week they win it. So
I've had Fitzpatrick was a very rare moment for me in one and done there, so I feel your pain.
Yeah, I don't think I've hit a winner. We've been doing this one and done league for years, and I don't think I've hit a winner in at least a couple of years. But
it's hard.
Yeah, we'll see. The nice thing about our league, every one and done league, it could be a little bit different, but our league we do have quarterly bonuses, which is nice. So you get guys like me that are buried way down the standings that probably don't really have a chance to win. Have a couple good weeks, I can win a quarter. I guess this was probably quarter coming up on the end of quarter 2, almost quarter 3. Not exactly sure, but nonetheless, yeah, we'll see how that all goes. Before we head out here, just talk about some score predictions. The winning score here the last 3 years at Quail Hollow, it's been 19 under, 17 under, 11 under. But interesting enough, all 3 of those were runaway wins. You had Wyndham Clark won by 4 in 23. You had Rory that won by 5 in 2024. And then Scheffler won by 5 at the PGA Championship at Quail Hollow last year. Just looking at the weather a little bit, it looks like, we might get some storms on Thursday. Maybe some other ones throughout the weekend might soften up the course a little bit. Lynn, just your thought on what we might see the score net out to this week.
Yeah, this is a hard one. And golfodds.com set it at 16.5, which I don't know. I guess it seems like sort of a hedge. I mean, it's not going to be 11 under like with Scotty and the PGA, but close to what the other guys did. But like you said, one guy ran away each year. So uh, the chances of that happening again are small. So I guess what I'm trying to talk myself into is saying under 16 and a half, less than 16 and a half will win. But we shall see. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think if we get the one guy that, has all facets of their game clicking, we talked about this, Quail Hollow, it takes every club in your bag to win here. And, the guys that play well, if you're in control of your golf ball here, I think there's a lot of opportunities to make some birdies. But, if you're just a little bit off, you're going to be scrambling for par on pretty much every hole. So I do think, some people kind of in the golf media world seems like they kind of criticize Quail Hollow and, say it's boring and whatnot. But the one thing it does a really good job of is identifying the best player that week. Obviously we've seen that the best player has won by a hefty margin here. So, 16 and a half, I would kind of lean under that. That does seem just a little bit high. I would think, probably somewhere in that 13, 14 range, but we'll see. If it plays a little bit softer, it'll play longer, obviously, but maybe the greens are a little bit more receptive. I know they do have the sub air system below them. They can kind of suck some of the moisture up, but we'll see what they decide to do there. But anyways, Lynn, that's going to just about do it for us. We'll be back next Tuesday for a full preview of the PGA Championship at Aronimink. We'll do another player draft we'll bring on Lauren and Kevin to help with that. Lynn, the player drafts have worked out very well for you so far this season. We did one at the Players, we did one at the Masters, and you ended up winning both of those. I ended up finishing last in both of those. So this is becoming a common theme. I don't seem to be too good at picking whether it's one and done or this, but we'll see what happens. I got to get off the schneid here. I think I should have the first pick again, so I guess I should already be thinking about
you're on the clock.
Who I want to take. If I want to bypass Scotty again like I did at the Masters, I don't think I'm going to make that same mistake again, but we'll see. You always do a piece, Lynn, for us, the rankings for the major championships. That'll be out probably this weekend or so, but that's always a huge help for anybody that's participating in any type of fantasy format for one of these major championships to go all the way through and just get a little nugget on everybody that is in the field for the PGA Championship. So looking forward to that. If you want to follow me on X, I will be at Roto_Ryan. Lynn is at Lynn Hochberg. We will see you guys all next week for the PGA Championship.